I never asked to join this club. None of us did. Given the impact on ourselves and our loved ones, I understand why so many stay silent. We as victims separate our minds from the trauma held within our body. It's simpler to put the memory and pain in a box and repeatedly tell yourself that it didn't really happen. But our bodies do not lie. They hold on to trauma, and that trauma manifests in multiple ways. I tried to move on. I am a survivor of deep trauma after all, having lost my older sister Stacy in an accident right before my 7th birthday that in my young mind was my fault. I was later violated by a high school peer and subsequently my national soccer team coach, both of whom I had placed my trust in. But what Harvey Weinstein did to me was the worst. His assault was excruciatingly traumatic. And for years, he walked away unfettered, while I spent years nursing my wounds. I've tried all sorts of therapies, trying to make sense of it all, trying to heal the physical manifestations of trauma. We break women by ignoring the very real ramifications of sexual assault and violence against them. This trauma settles within the very cells of our DNA, and it passes down generation to generation. That is the gravity of what is at stake here. And during this recent trial and the almost 3 years leading up to it, I was asked, like others, to relive and lay bare the most horrific and humiliating experience of my entire life, with complete strangers, the general public, and even my own family, in ways so harmful, more harmful than you can imagine. When we ignore a woman's cries of pain, when we tell her that she is to blame, that she asked for it, that this was just business as usual, when we insist her memory is imperfect, that perhaps she was too ambitious, we don't just deny her experience, we deny her natural trauma response, her basic instinct to protect herself by trying to turn her perpetrator into something positive in her mind so she can bury what happened in the recesses of her memory and move forward in her life. That is her survival mechanism after all. And in our voracious attempt to judge, we take it away from her. We rob her of that. Sadly, this experience for survivors is all too common. Let's not forget Weinstein was a serial predator for decades, with well over 100 women on record claiming he sexually assaulted them. He is not the only one, of course. There are others who have stood trial and gotten away with it, or yet to be brought to justice for repeated patterns of sexual harassment and assault. And while I firmly believe that most men are good men, the outliers are the serial perpetrators who do the bulk of damage and, yes, should face lifelong consequences. Yet often they're held accountable only after there is so much damage and it is too late. As was the case with Weinstein, over and over again, too many catered to him in public, excused his lewd behavior, and turned a blind eye to his questionable relationships with young actresses and models. This culture enabled him to pay off or intimidate his victims, avoiding accountability for decades. And the circle of silence and enabling went even further as people continued to do business with him, run his companies, sit on his boards, protect him in the press, and turn a blind eye to one of the worst kept secrets in the entertainment industry. And when survivors ultimately had the courage to come forward, defense attorneys used sexism, misogyny, and aggressive bullying tactics to intimidate, demean, and ridicule them. This is how we have a culture that enables sexual predators, and we are all the worse for it. The entertainment and tech industries, as the largest cultural communicators of our time, have key roles to play in ending widespread harassment and assault. I've said this before, and I will say it again, we survivors cannot do it on our own. It is time our male allies in positions of privilege in both industries stand up to the few bad apples who haven't just ruined individual women's lives, but stifled the female talent pool, dampening our creative and economic output. This entire process has been one of the hardest experiences of my life. But the most important takeaway is that we all have a role to play in healing this culture where violence against women is the norm. I stand here today committed as ever to healing this narrative for our daughters and our sons, to righting these injustices and transforming our culture for the better. And I hope you all will join me.